UK restaurants will be legally barred from keeping tips from staff under plans to be announced by Theresa May on Monday. Her vow comes 3 years after a government consultation found restaurant customers overwhelmingly supported tips going to waiting staff, rather than proprietors.
Here's a summary of the article.
Restaurants will be legally barred from keeping tips from staff under plans to be announced by Theresa May on Monday. We developed a code of practice, together with Unite, which deals with the fair distribution of tips among all staff, not just waiters, said UK Hospitality Chief Executive Kate Nichols. Ms. Nichols also said smaller restaurants may need to retain a small amount from card tips to cover the not inconsiderable costs of credit card charges and processing payments. In 2016, Sajid Javid, then business secretary, said tips should go in full to waiting staff and announced proposals to stop employer deductions from them, but stopped short of legislating. A government spokesperson was unable to say whether the legislation would also cover the practice of customer tips left for waiting staff being redistributed to include back-of-house staff such as cooks and kitchen workers. Unite Regional Officer Dave Turnbull said cracking down on tipping abuses was long overdue and the union would seek assurances that the legislation truly delivered fair tips. There will be question marks as to whether it will deal with the myriad of scams some restaurants use to pilfer staff tips to boost their profits, in addition to dealing with unjust situation at TGI Fridays, who use tips left for waiting staff to subsidize the low wages of skilled kitchen staff, he said.
This post received a score of 2,722, with an upvote ratio of 96%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Keeping tips from staff is theft, and not much better than withholding wages. In a way, it's almost fraud too. How many people would still tip if they knew this was happening?
Tips should be made illegal, that way restaurant owners would be forced to pay a living wage instead of undercutting their staff and make them rely on tips. Luckily in the UK, and in pretty much every other country, is tipping not that common. I never understood the concept to begin with. I love going to the US, but every American will say tipping makes the service better. No, it doesn't. It's the same, at best, as anywhere else.
Being this is in the UK, I was under the impression that there was no tipping culture, meaning any tips are legitimately extra income.
They are. Waiting staff in the UK have the same wage laws as everyone else. But a 10% tip is still common practice for good service.
Just thought I'd add that is common practice for good service at restaurants with waitstaff, maybe a coffee shop if you're feeling generous, never at a bar or pub. Tipping in North America is getting out of control. I've been to bars where you have to queue at the bar and the bar staff have been rude because a friend didn't tip. The staff are literally just standing there and putting drinks into glasses and expect a tip. Source: Brit who now lives in Canada.
I went on holiday to Florida. Took a toured trip to the Space Center. On the bus trip back the tour guide talked about how he was reliant on tips and hoped we would donate to him as he would be getting hardly any pay otherwise. Pretty much put a bad cloud over the whole trip. He greeted us as we left the tour bus and pressured us to give him a tip. If businesses can't afford to pay their staff a fair wage, they don't deserve to be running. Tips should be for good service. Not ever assumed.
Agreed. WTF at inventing another job where you don't have to pay people min wage, a wage I might add that is only minimum because any lower and you wouldn't be able to afford gas to get to work or hot water for a shower or clothes. Never mind the car repairs, rent, food and everything else you can't afford on min wage. Quote, if you ever go to Cancun they beg you for tips for everything. On one tour I got 4 different buses and 2 tour guides Chichen Itza, and every single one of them begged for a tip saying they have families to feed etc.
Minimum wage in Mex is $4 USD per day. Most service staff get paid exactly that. Of course they beg.
If I left a tip for the waiter and it went into the owner's pocket, I would never leave a tip again. The owner can set the price of the dishes to make his money. The purpose of a tip is not to reward the owner even further.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by SMMRY.com, without any human intervention.